Hello, I'm Aaron Liggett. Today I will be presenting to you my research on modeling landscape performance of a watershed approach in urban design. I am a practicing landscape architect in the state of California and a faculty member at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I work on a wide range of projects and instruct an array of classes, which has influenced my research direction, focusing on technical aspects of ecological design with an emphasis on stormwater management and sustainable practices. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Christina O'Hara, a colleague and mentor of mine at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, who has encouraged me in this study. Her PhD thesis on the Olmsted Brothers provides insight that was invaluable in discovering the outcomes of this study. This study presents methods to stimulate, test, and interpret how natural systems might have interacted with the built environment. Using these methods, I will examine the proposed designs by the Olmsted Brothers landscape architecture firm of a greenbelt network planned for Los Angeles during the 1920s, along with understanding various systems of the multifunctional parkways. This process will visualize how the parkways would have managed stormwater in the watershed of an urban context. A context experiencing rapid population growth and increasingly frequent major storms. A portion of the Olmsted Brothers Hollywood-Palos Verdes Parkway was selected to test this methodology. Grading plans were used to analyze form and function, planting plans to assess experiential and visual perception, drainage plans to evaluate how the watershed is managed, letters and reports to interpret design intent. This information was used to digitally analyze and visualize the spatial arrangement and functions of the parkways. Lastly, the objective is to reveal insights that can respond to contemporary concerns about water management and sustainable urban planning and multifunctional landscapes. To evaluate the function of the parkway, stormwater management is analyzed as it is the only quantifiable element. In a quantitative analysis of the parkways, digital models recreate designs in the greater contextual landscape to help visualize how the parkway may have appeared. To understand geographic, political, and cultural context, historic documents, photographs, and geopolitical maps are compiled, along with quantitative and qualitative letters and reports written by members of the Olmsted Brothers firm. To understand design intent, I use my expertise as a landscape architect to interpret and abstract design strategies by deconstructing plans, technical details, and illustrative drawings. Additionally, I viewed photos of past built projects to identify details and how users interacted within the design spaces. A variety of digital software is used in the process to interpret, analyze, calculate, and visualize the functional outcomes of the design and how the parkways handle stormwater during large events. While I evaluate, so what? Did the process work? Would the parkway have been successful? And what do we take from the study? In order to answer those questions, the project shall be evaluated across a set of ordering systems which evaluate the success across economic, environmental, functional, sociocultural, and aesthetic realms. However, this presentation focuses primarily on stormwater management as it's the only quantifiable element. During the 1920s, Los Angeles was the fastest growing urban community in America. Despite this huge population influx, Los Angeles was being built without a comprehensive master plan for growth. Haphazard urban sprawl led to disconnected of new communities from established roadways. Los Angeles had the largest per capita ownership of automobiles, which led to new landscape types and shifts away from public transit. Additionally, there was increased desire for recreation. Similar to conditions in California today, The climate in Los Angeles during the 1920s and 30s was one that suffered prolonged droughts followed by severe storms. While there is the Los Angeles River that runs along the city, most of it is subterranean with high water appearing periodically during times of rain. Lacking an understanding of the seasonal rivers, homes were built in the floodplains, disrupting how they controlled water and causing severe damage to neighborhoods during flood events. The Los Angeles flood of 1938 was one of the largest floods in Los Angeles history. The flood was caused by a storm that generated almost 1 year's worth of precipitation in just a few days. 108,000 acres were flooded, destroying 5,600 homes. This study uses the rainfall data from this storm event to predict how the parkway would have performed during the storm, which occurred 10 years after the proposed designs. In response to the ecological and cultural strains on Los Angeles during this time, there was a movement for improved landscapes, which called for the efficient management of water, expansion of public parks, and new transportation infrastructure. A solution was proposed by the Olmsted Brothers: construct a series of interconnected parkways that would serve as multimodal transportation routes while also providing green space for recreation, wildlife habitat, and stormwater management. With over 2,500 projects across the US and dozens of public projects in Los Angeles alone, the Olmsted Brothers were leaders of their time in ecological and urban planning. Reviewing plans and reports written by the firm, along with scholarly research performed by others, a list of guiding design principles and approaches are abstracted that the Olmsted Brothers carefully measured. Having the foresight to consider these characteristics and prioritize these values was revolutionary for the time, and even today. Many of the factors that were here were considered and integrated into their improved landscapes, integrated into their improved landscaped parkway proposal. However, this study focuses on the functional components, in particular on how the parkways would have managed stormwater. What emerged was an extensive system of parkways that connected the business district in Los Angeles to the surrounding neighborhoods and recreational amenities. Labeled the Hollywood-Palos Verdes Parkways, the greenways would link the county of Los Angeles from the mountains to the sea and further inland along the Los Angeles, San Gabriel, and Rio Hondo rivers. The parkway plan connected existing parks and proposed new parks with the aspiration of providing all neighborhoods to be within walking distance to open green space. The cross sections here depict two of the many varieties of parkway treatments. Each is centered around a drainage channel, the size and shape based off existing physical conditions and the consideration of the volume of watershed runoff. In addition to controlling stormwater, the channels also provide green space amenities and act as wildlife corridors. Paths run along the edge of the parkway for pedestrian uses. A pleasure drive and through traffic roads are located on either side of the drive, on either side of the channel. The drive is more enclosed by vegetation and is used for leisure driving, while the road is a route for commuting. An equestrian riding path runs linearly with the parkway. And a service road and a sidewalk facilitate the local community. In some instances, the parkway runs alongside a railroad, which is typically treated with a vegetative berm to function as a visual and noise buffer. Vegetated buffers separate modes of traffic while providing a sense of safety and immersion into the parkway. Layers of different sized trees soften the scale of the parkway with the neighborhood's edge, while creating a dense vertical ecological structure that enhances the user's experience and could be suitable for wildlife movement and habitat connectivity. These are just two examples of the parkway layout. You will see that the spatial arrangements of the design elements vary depending on the surrounding urban and natural context. The Olmsted Brothers use layers of information to decide the most suitable land for the parkways. To search for spatial patterns in the parkway layout, I use GIS to recreate the social, political, and ecological elements of 1920s Los Angeles, such as demographics, transportations, topography, hydrology, and existing state parks. Additionally, existing Olmsted projects were mapped to understand how they may have influenced the location of the proposed parkways, which is shown here. When overlaid, what stood out most to me was how the parkways veined across the watershed, creating somewhat of evenly spaced sections within the Dominguez watershed, which is my area of focus. Here is a further developed conceptual plan from the Olmsted Brothers showing the network of existing state parks and greenway and their greenway network through Los Angeles County. Overall, it was easy to conclude that there was a strong correlation with all these layers of information with the GIS overlays. To test this method, one portion of the parkway was selected, a large site of significance that would have had significant challenges to manage stormwater. The Alondra Park in Dominguez Slough is a large node where 4 parkways intersect. The slough is also a discharge point within the watershed where common flooding occurs. Here's the location in a satellite image from today. Note that it is a major hub and location where parkways intersect. So the first step was to gather and interpret archived plans. I had full sets of illustrative layout plans, grading plans, and planting plans, and they were stitched together. Once digitized, I traced them in AutoCAD. In addition to the proposed grading plans, the existing topography of the surrounding context were scanned from a 1923 USGS survey map. When overlaid, the proposed grading design and approaches became more apparent. After digitized in CAD, one can clearly identify the different designated uses in the parkway, with separate routes for automobile to drive, pedestrian paths to walk, equestrian riding paths, channelized water, and trains. It is a quite complex interwoven network organized around the central channelized water. The CAD line work was also incorporated into GIS to analyze topographic, hydrologic, and spatial data. It was also manipulated in Civil 3D for watershed delineations, stormwater elevations, and stream calculations. I evaluated the watersheds that were derived from the drainage plan created by the Olmsted Brothers and compared it to one against the contemporary USGS watershed. What is fascinating is that the watershed delineated by the Olmsteds were nearly identical in form and size as the watersheds delineated today with modern technologies. The care and accuracy that the Olmsted Brothers put into their drainage plan is not only remarkable, but demonstrates how significant it was to the success of their parkways. And once again, note there is a clear pattern in how the parkway is spread out evenly across the watershed. Based off the watershed size, soil type, land use, and slope of the terrains, the volume of the stormwater runoff was calculated for different intensities of storm events. Using Civil 3D's storm and sanitary analysis, the water height of each basin is calculated, which when modeled in SketchUp creates a visualization of how the proposed basins could have retained stormwater from a normally dry landscape, void of water, to different levels of storm events. The maps were imported into 3D modeling software in order to orbit and visualize the landscape in orthographic projections. Visualizing the spatial qualities, we can get a hint of the experience of being immersed in the parkway and communicate how the parkway would perform during heavy rainfall events, creating habitat and transformations into unique landscapes. Vegetative buffers comfortably separate paths into a multimodal transportation network in a multifunctional landscape as it controls stormwater to prevent flooding and maintain a functional parkway during extreme weather. While some portions of the parkway lead you into the channel, providing you opportunities to interact with nature, others use landforms to buffer adjacent uses and better control stormwater due to the existing site conditions. They also communicate how the parkway would perform during heavy rainfall events. A characteristic to note is that the further downstream along the corridor one gets, the wider the corridor gets, the channel gets, increasing its capacity to hold more stormwater. When compared to the storm event that occurred in 1938, these portions of the parkway would have successfully managed the stormwater. Let's take a look back at the context of today. As you can imagine, Los Angeles appears much different today than what the Olmsted brothers had imagined. While some of their ideas eventually inspired some completed projects, such as the golf course at Alondra Park, their dream of a linear parkway network was never created. However, we could start to imagine what it might look like if it did. A series of interconnected parkways that would serve as multimodal transportation routes through areas of diverse demographics and uses that provide green space for recreation, wildlife habitat, and stormwater management. While the parkway plans were abandoned, the city eventually did begin constructing a series of stormwater control channels. However, with the sole function of gathering and transporting stormwater as quickly as possible. With little interest to the aesthetics and the public needs, the channels were stark with little comfort. Here are some images of what the Dominguez channel looks like today. What if these current channels went looking like this to draw an inspiration from nature to create habitats or create opportunities for recreations or connections with nature? And that wraps up my presentation. Please feel free to make comments and ask questions, as I would love to start conversations over the presented material and how to advance my research approach. Thank you.